That's right, it is. Auto repair, personal care. Well, I'd never get it right. Matt Gibbs in the building. Matt, good morning.
Good morning. How are you, Tom?
A little better than I was the other day when I saw you. But
Yes, sir.
I recover every day gets a little better with the back surgery. So I came over though. The reason I came over to see Matt is we used Matt. My fiance and I were purchasing a car, looking to purchase a car.
Yep.
And we did what Matt told us to do. We listened. We're coachable. We said, and it was a friend of ours we're buying the car from, but friends are friends and business is business.
Right. That's right.
And so we looked at our friend and we go, look, we're very interested in this vehicle, but we want to take it to a mechanic and get them to do a diagnostic on it and everything. Do you mind? First non-red flag. He said, sure, by all means, go get it checked out. If he'd have said, yeah, I got a problem with that, that's what Matt Gibbs says, that's a red flag.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
But he was like, no, sure. I go, take it to Matt Gibbs. He's like, sure, go ahead. So we took it over to you. It's an older vehicle. There were some problems when you ran a diagnostic. There were some issues, but not anything that was debilitating. Just we took your guidance, and I asked him, Matt, I don't know if he does this for everybody, but he did for me. Thank you for doing this. He gave me some counsel on, because he knows a thing or two about buying cars. He's had a car lot there at Sunrise before, and he goes to auctions and everything. He gave me a little counsel on what I should negotiate around what the worth of this vehicle was. Now, I don't know if you do that for everybody.
I do.
But see, that's a huge help to know where, because you're a professional mechanic. You know what you're talking about. You know what the cost of the repairs would be. And you have to figure that in, because if you're going to have to figure in, if you have a set amount of money you want to spend, if you don't figure in the repairs to that vehicle, you're over budget.
Right. That's right.
I mean, people don't. No. I had $3,000 allotted for the car. I bought the car for $3,000. Yeah, but then what'd you have to do to it? Well, I had to replace a blower motor in the air condition.
Yep.
I had to replace a cracked headlight, and the windshield needed to be replaced. How much was that? $1,400. So you spent $4,400 on that car, didn't you?
That's right.
People don't think of it that way.
That's
It's
right.
kind of like people don't think when it says $27.99 at the gas pump, they go, "Ooh, gas is $2.79 a gallon." No, it's not. It's $2.80 a gallon.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
But people don't think about that. So Matt Gibbs has offered that. That's something he does, and you'll do it for any consumer. Good,
Yeah,
good for
absolutely.
you.
Absolutely.
So you got a guest with you today.
I do. I have a guest today.
American Transmission.
That's
Mr.
right.
Hogan.
Mr. Bob Hogan.
Good morning.
How are you, sir?
Doing well. So glad to be with you.
What is American Transmission?
American Transmission is a corporation in Jacksonville that remanufactures transmissions, transfer cases, differentials. We build some moderate road vehicle transmissions for people that like a little more in their car. And we've been in business since the late 70s.
Right there on Beach Boulevard. I know exactly where the original building is located.
Yeah, it was a Ford dealership. We tore
Right.
it down, and we have a 1-acre building there with about 28 builders. We have about 100 employees, and we
Wasn't that where Duval Ford was originally? I think that's where Duval Ford was originally.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's my hometown, man. You know?
He knows it better than I do.
Well, people say, where are you from? I say, South Georgia. They go, what part? I go, Jacksonville. Because let's be honest, Jacksonville's more Georgia than it is Florida. Okay, let's just clear that up.
Till the game's played.
Till the game's played. 1 weekend a year, it's the Florida-Georgia game. And it is called the Gator Bowl, you know.
Yeah.
So, when Matt, you being a mechanic now, you brought Bob in to talk to us. When he says they remanufacture transmissions. Now, when I was a kid, when people bring stuff to my dad, when he owned the Sunoco's before he got involved with Main Street Transmission, he would go and he would say transmission, and he would send it down to his buddy at Main Street Transmission. This was in the early 70s, and they would rebuild the transmission.
Yep.
What's the difference between remanufacture and rebuild, or is it the same thing?
Well, let me back up for a minute and just I'm very particular on people that I bring in and have on the show, and so one of the reasons why I was talking to I asked Bob if he would come and be on the show, is that I promote companies that are great companies. Okay, but here's the deal, and we've been honest, we're transparent here. I've opened up and shared with all our listeners and whatnot. We're not perfect. So here
it's not an exact science. We're humans.
That's exactly right. And so I always learn the character of a person, of a business, by when we have an issue. You know, when we have an issue, then we really find out who's
100%.
who's who.
When the rubber meets the road
Right.
is when you have an issue.
So I had used American Transmission, and going back to what you were saying about the local guy that rebuilds the transmissions, here's the problem that I have with a lot of the guys locally is that a lot of these folks don't have 2 weeks to wait to get their transmission back.
Right.
Typically, I can call American Transmission. Usually I can have a transmission the next day, so I can pull it out. He's got one that's already been rebuilt. I put that one in. I give him the one I take out,
And they refurbish it
for the next guy.
for the next guy.
But one of the things I really like about the company is because I did have an issue with a transmission one time. I had an issue. They're in Jacksonville.
Yeah.
So here I have an issue, and I'm thinking, here we go. They're in Jacksonville. What am I going to do?
93 miles away.
I call them up and I tell them, hey, this is what's going on. And their technical assistance guy says, hey, did you do this? Yes, we did everything according to what you want us to do. Not a problem. The next day, they didn't tell me to pull the transmission out and send it back. And no, they came with a tow truck, picked up the truck, took it to Jacksonville,
Fixed it.
and brought it back.
Brought it back to you.
So for me.
There's no headache there for you.
And there's no headache for you if
Right.
you're the customer.
Yeah.
And that's what I like.
Well, that's like there was a guy in Georgia when I lived in Georgia, and I to this day I tell all my friends that live in Statesboro, this is the mechanic you should go to, and I'll tell you why. He did a service for me, and the oil plug didn't get put in real well, and it blew out. I went to him and said, "Hey, you changed my oil. The oil plug blew out. And, I had to go emergency tow to this area and everything. They had to fix this and everything. This is the bill they gave me. What are you going to do about this?" He goes, "I apologize. Obviously, this was an error of ours and everything." He looked at everything. He goes, "If I pay this bill and give you $500 on top of it, will that solve the problem?" Everybody I know, I say, that's the mechanic to go see in Statesboro, Georgia.
right.
Because not only did he pay the bill, he didn't have to give me $500 extra. He said, "Will this bill and a $500 extra check take care of the problem and keep your business with me?" That's what you mean by American Transmission does.
That's pretty
They may not
outstanding.
they may not give you a $500 check, but they take the headache out of you having and the consumer having to worry about the transmission that they gave you not functioning properly.
That's right.
And that's a big deal.
That's huge.
And another thing you talked about is you're right. The one drawback my dad had when he couldn't do the transmission had to be rebuilt, he sent it down to Main Street. He'd tell people, "I had to send your transmission to Main Street. It'll be 7 to 10 days before we get it back."
And that's if they didn't lie.
And this was in the early 70s.
Right.
So
Well, they'll tell you it'll be done on Friday, but they
Right.
don't tell you it's going to be 4 Fridays from now.
they didn't tell you which Friday.
Yeah,
They
they
said it was
don't,
going to be
they
on
didn't
Friday.
explain all that part.
They didn't. So how did this relationship come about?
Well, actually, Bob he had a mechanical shop here in town and a car lot also for years.
28.
And then he kind of retired. I guess he retired to go back to work.
I saved myself from a heart attack.
Yeah, I feel you, brother.
So now, Bob, you work for American Transmission. You're a sales rep for American Transmission.
Right. I have the territory from Marion County all the way down to the Keys, covering shops,
You need
transmission
you
shops.
need
and
you
stuff.
need an assistant because I can go handle the keys and all for you.
Well,
I'm outgoing. I'm gregarious. I can sell. I can sell real
your
good.
boss is in the other room.
Yeah, he can't hear me. He can't hear me. I just want to get to the keys. You know what I'm saying? Once I get down to the key, that job thing, I don't need it anymore. I'm down here with my toes in the sand, cold beer in my hand.
you're Jimmy Buffing it.
Exactly. Yeah. But the thing I like about this is, like you said, the time it saves. You don't have to say, okay, we take the transmission off, we send it off to somebody, they repair it, then they send it back to me. You call up and say, hey, I got a 2013 Cadillac SRX transmission gone. I need a transmission for it. They say, okay, what liter of the engine and everything? You get all that cleared up. They say, we can have it to you tomorrow, delivered tomorrow.
Well, let me hit hit you with something here. We have grown so fast that now we're 3 to 5 days that we're safe. And I want to be
Okay, let's
I didn't know all that before we got on the air.
interview's over.
candidly.
Interview's over. We're done.
Yeah. Well, the transparency thing is what I was thinking of. Many times you'll get it next day.
Right.
Okay. But we are now pre-flashing the Chevy trucks, the 6L80s and 90s and the 6075s. What that requires of us is to build that transmission, put a dummy computer and solenoids in it and run it through the dyno, and then we have to drop the pan and put a brand new reflashed computer, or what they call a Tremec, along with the solenoids in it. So that process takes a little longer, but we have found it saves the customer a whole extra day of trying to get it flashed and reprogrammed.
Didn't you like back in the day when it was just bolts and nuts in a transmission?
It still is bolts and nuts.
Some gears,
Now it's got some computer stuff.
Computer
and bolts and
stuff,
nuts.
Lots of computer stuff.
And now, does American Transmission do both automatic and manual transmissions?
We do. We're one of the few that will do a manual transmission. In fact, we'll pick up your old one, build it for you if you want, and Matt can get it out if you need.
Because
do it.
I'm the guy that, and I know I live in Florida, I grew up in Florida and everything, but I'm still that guy that if I had my druthers, because they're almost impossible to find in Florida, if I had my druthers, I'd rather have 5-speed than I would automatic transmission. It's just me.
Well,
Just me.
unfortunately, the manufacturers aren't agreeing with
No,
you.
of course not. No, they would rather have automatic transmissions than they would manual trans. I understand, but I lived in the north of Atlanta, and I lived in the North Carolina mountains long enough that manual transmissions have saved my rear end when an automatic transmission wouldn't have in the snow and stuff like that. So I have a penchant for it. But it's a lost art driving a manual shift transmission. I told a friend of mine's son the other day, 17 years old. I go, you don't even know anything about driving cars. Y'all just put it down to D and you go. I go, could you drive a 4-speed or a 5-speed? He goes, like a race car thing? Sure, I can do that in the floor. I can figure it out. I go, no, I'm talking about 3-speed on the column.
There
Could
you
you
go.
drive one of those?
Oh, yeah.
Because my dad taught me, I learned to drive in a Chevrolet C10 with a 3-speed on the column.
Yeah.
And my old man said, if you can drive this, you can drive anything.
That's right.
And you better not touch them gears. I don't want to hear no gears clanking.
No. And,
yeah.
But if you were, unless you were really good at shifting 3-speed on the column, there was going to be a little grind. My dad could do it. You wouldn't even know he was shifting gears. That 3-speed on the column. But, transmissions have come a long way in a very short period of time, because it wasn't that long ago that the transmission didn't have all these computer stuff in it and everything. It was still the basic transmission. So it's an area that people have been playing, that technology and knowledge has been growing by leaps and bounds here recently.
Yes, we really see that. Now we have 6 speeds are very common. 8 speeds are becoming more
coming.
common.
Yeah.
10 speeds, and now there's even an 11 speed out there. So that thing is constantly shifting, causes some issues. In fact, there's constant updates on things and what needs to be done.
I would think once you get to about 8 speeds, anything past that, it'd be shifting constantly, wouldn't it?
Well, one of the other things too that's changing, and people need to understand this, it's so critical with their fluid. The fluid that, back in the day, there was you had the Ford transmission and GM transmission
F-type
fluids.
Dextron.
Which one was it? Was it the transmission fluids you could use as brake fluid, or was it the other way
No,
around?
you could use transmission fluid for power steering
For
fluid.
power steering, that's what it was.
But
Don't do brake fluid.
but you
brake.
take transmission fluid and use it in your power steering.
Yeah, you could.
Can you still do that?
you could probably get away with it, But the transmission fluids now in these things, this is so critical stuff.
And
This
it's
is
sealed, isn't it?
Really critical.
Is it sealed these days, or is it?
No, they're still serviceable. Most of them are serviceable. When something brand new comes out, they'll tell you it's non-serviceable because they're trying to figure out exactly what's going on with it, and they'll go through that for about a year, and then they'll come out. But a lot of the Chryslers, you can't even check. There's no dipstick. You can't even check the transmission fluid. So you have to have a scan tool and a special stick, and depending on what the temperature of the engine is, you dip it, and there's a scale on this stick. It's a universal stick, and it should tell you about where the range is,
Right.
where your fluid is, and it's just the whole car, the car in general, is just becoming so much more sophisticated, and and people don't, people just put it, like you said, they put it in drive
and go,
and they just go down the road, and they have no idea. It's an absolute astonishment of what is going on for you to go from here to the other end of this mall.
I'm sure.
It's crazy.
Like right now, I have this thing going on with my car. Every third time I crank it, the stability track tells me it needs to be serviced. Now, the 2 times I was crank it, nothing. Third time I crank it, stability track needs to be serviced. About every 5th time I crank it, airbag needs to be serviced. And I know you've told me I need to come put that thing on. Exactly. There's computer fixes. I know. But it's you don't think of those things. All you think is put a drive and go.
Just like he just said a minute ago, he said like there's a new 11-speed transmission out.
Yeah.
That's already comes out with all these updates.
Already.
So you know what that means? So what does it mean? Oh, an update. So
job security for Matt Gibbs.
Well, in order to do an update, I do them all on GM cars. Okay, they actually, through American Transmission, this is for shop owners out there, through Drew Technologies, they have that box, right? You still offer the box, and this box is you just plug into the car, and there's a guy on the other end of this on the other line of the internet, and he's helping you plug into whatever car it is,
right,
to give it those new updates. So it's not like, oh, we go in there and people still come in and they still say, can I get my transmission service? Oh, do y'all adjust the bands? I'm like, when they say that, that's almost like saying, are you going to replace the points in my ignition system?
Exactly.
Man, I ain't seen a set of points in 20 years.
Let me ask you this question, because you always hear with the new vehicles coming out now, they're built better, built tougher, and you can go, they say now as long as you get the oil change regularly and you do preventative maintenance and all, cars can last 200, 250, 300,000 miles. Or, and usually when I think about that, the first thing that comes to my mind is you're talking about the motor can last that long. How long is the average life, or is there an average life of a transmission, or does that depend on how well you upkeep the transmission and everything?
You want me to take that?
Yeah, you can have that one.
Well, it depends on the transmission, how it's used and how it's maintained, like you brought out. So a transmission can usually go 100, 200,000 miles. I've seen some go for 300. But then again, it's depending on how the person drives it, whether they abuse it. One of the big things is people run in overdrive and they're pulling a trailer. And those overdrive clutches are a third the size of the clutches otherwise.
I never understand, if you got a towing package on your pickup truck or on your big vehicle, and you put your 26-foot boat on the back of it, and then you put it in overdrive and think that that's good for the motor and the transmission. I don't understand that. If you're pulling it, it's clear if you attach something to the towing package, take it out of overdrive. The vehicle doesn't belong in overdrive if it's pulling anything.
Well, another thing, too, people do it because of fuel mileage, but what they don't realize is because that motor's straining to pull that load, it'll actually get better fuel mileage out of overdrive.
These cars are not dumb anymore.
Right.
Okay, it's designed for overdrive, nothing holding it back, where it can overdrive smoothly and get on down the highway. If there's something attached to it pulling, overdrive's not working. And by the way, I have a friend of mine, very, very small. He had and this happened when we were in college. He had a Chevy, the Blazer S10. Remember the little Blazer S10? Yep. And it had overdrive in it and everything. We were pulling a 150 horsepower scooter, Honda Helix scooter, 1991, on a 5x8 trailer. At the most, it was 1,400 pounds. The trailer, the scooter, and everything. At the most. He put that Blazer in overdrive, coming from Atlanta to Statesboro. We lost a transmission in Lawrence County, in Dublin, about 40 miles from Statesboro, because he burned his transmission up, driving that little S10 in overdrive, pulling a 1,400-pound weight behind it.
Yeah, let me just kind of explain that, because in overdrive, those clutches, they start slipping, they produce heat. Heat's the enemy of a transmission. In fact, GM is having such a problem with their 6 and 8L transmissions that there's a technical bulletin came out last year about going to a different fluid rather than the regular Dextron 6, going to what's called LV, or low viscosity fluid. And in fact, we have that bulletin on our manual that we give to our customers when we go over things with them. And in fact, the 10 speeds are so bad that at the dealership level, if you bring the tranny in or the car in with a tranny shutter problem, they automatically change to this fluid, this ultra low viscosity, even thinner. What they're doing is putting more fluid across the clutches to cool them because they're having this shuttering issue. The actual lockup occurs now in 6 to 8 miles an hour and goes all the way through the gears, and that torque converter gets very hot and has a lot of issues. And it heats up, and if you can't get her cool, she's going to burn out.
Yeah, that's right. Heat is the death knell of a transmission.
See, and so just in that, what you're talking, your story about your S10 Blazer.
S10 Blazer.
See, okay, so one of the issues, and hey, I'm just a guy that worked at a dealership and became, owns his own shop, but it never made much sense to me that we used to cool the transmission fluid through the radiator. So, right? There's a transmission cooler in the radiator. So what if the engine, I know that we put 195 degree thermostats in them, so we want it to run at 195 degrees. If we can keep the transmission temperature about 175 degrees, we realized that the transmission would normally last 4 times longer.
4 times longer by dropping the degrees.
By 20 degrees. So I'm thinking, why don't they put external cool? So whenever we had a transmission issue, and if you call me up and say, hey, I'm pulling a boat, I'm pulling a camper, the first thing I wanted to do back in the day was add an external cooler to your transmission, because I knew that was the best thing I could do to keep you from having to put a transmission in it after you pull a little scooter.
Right. He pulled a little bitty scooter, had to replace the entire transmission in that S10.
So today, and Bob's talking about these GM transmissions, so the transmission coolers are now in front of the radiator, and it's the bottom. So you have the condenser for your air conditioner, and the bottom 2/3 of the condenser is now your transmission cooler to help keep that transmission from getting hot. That's so important not to let your transmission get overheated.
Because they're computers now, folks. They're smarter than we are.
Yeah, we did testing on that. We found that between 220 and 240, you cut the life of the tranny in half.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, you were talking about 190-degree water around that transmission fluid. Yeah. The transmission fluid comes out usually around 300 degrees.
Yep.
So there's got to be a lot of transfer of heat to keep that right.
A lot. Hey, Bob Hogan from American Transmission, he joined Matt Gibbs today. You can go bhogan@americantransmission.com if you want to get in touch with Bob, or you can get in touch with him through Matt at Sunrise. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Talk to you next week.
Bye.
1370 AM, 96.3 FM. This is WOCA, The Source.
Broadcasting from the Paddock Mall Studios, this is WOCA, Ocala, Gainesville, The Villages, 1370 AM, 96.